It's like Shakespeare, but with lots more punching. It's like Goethe, but with lots more crunching. Like Titanic, but the boat's still floating. No, it's not. The motherfucking boat is exploding. Nextwave.
Welcome, my friends, to episode 21 of Comic DNA. On today's episode, we will be talking about Nextwave, Ages of Hate, by Warren Ellis and Stuart Immonen. I am Aaron Walther, and with me, as always, is Luke Thompson-Moritz.
Thank you.
And for this episode, we welcome back Jon Parrish. Jon, thank you for coming back to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Excellent. Listeners of the show will remember that Jon was the guest we had for I Kill Giants. So yeah, happy to have Jon back. We're talking about Nextwave. This is written by Warren Ellis, and Warren Ellis is a pretty huge name in the comic book industry, to put it lightly. I'm a big fan of his work, and there are a whole big number of his books that are on my list of books that we need to read for future episodes of this podcast. And in a way, it's a bit ironic that the first Ellis book we're doing is one of the books he did for Marvel Comics and not one of the monumental and influential books he did for Vertigo or Wildstorm, books like Transmetropolitan or The Authority or Planetary, which are all really great, important books. But as listeners of this podcast probably know, I am a big fan of comedic comics. So needless to say, I really, really enjoyed Nextwave because it's pretty funny. The other big selling point of Nextwave, of course, is that it is drawn by Stuart Immonen, who is, in my opinion, I think he's one of the most talented mainstream artists working in the industry today. Immonen is one of the few artists who has carved out a unique and dynamic style that naturally fits like almost any Marvel Comics title without it looking like a house style. Like, it still doesn't look like other Marvel artists. And then in this book, he gets to draw some real far-out, crazy fun stuff and play around with some different styles, actually, whenever the story demands it. But Immonen is also a pretty big name in the industry. I think right now he's drawing one of the X-Men books. I don't remember what it was called. The book with Bendis, Brian Michael Bendis, the X-Men book. But he's been a high-profile artist for a long time. Actually, when this book came out, that was 2006, 2007. And it only ran for 12 issues. And Ellis was, I think he had said something about how his plan was to just write 12 issues and then hand it off to another writer. But then he had also said that he would keep writing the book if Immonen were to keep drawing it. But Immonen was getting really popular at the time of this book, and the sales of this book weren't enough to justify Immonen's pay rate that he commanded for being such a popular writer or a popular artist. So Marvel obviously wanted to put him on some higher profile books. And that's kind of why this book kind of ends at issue number 12, and then nothing was ever heard of it ever again.
It's kind of depressing.
It is kind of depressing because I really would have liked to have seen more from this book. We'll definitely get into it as, you know, when we start talking about the book, but there's something that's really, really unique about this book that you just don't get from a standard Marvel comic. And as listeners of this podcast probably understand, that is one of the things that I really appreciate about a comic, is something that I can only get from the comic, an experience that is truly unique. And so that's why we're talking about Nextwave, and I think that's all I have to say about that.
Yeah, we can just kind of jump into the book itself.
So, Luke, we're not going to let Jon talk yet.
No, wait, he talked enough on the last one. Let's be real here.
I'm okay. I can wait.
Good. So, Luke, why don't you hit us with a synopsis of Nextwave? What is Nextwave?
Nextwave is a squad of ragtag, sort of makeshift heroes formed by an anti-terrorism group, Hate, that is coincidentally funded by a terrorist organization. So that's already getting into the comedy of the book. Once they find out that Hate is funded by a terrorist organization, they break out and become like a ragtag hero group, and they go and fight biological and organic weapons that Hate and Beyond have hidden around the United States, while the leader of Hate is pursuing them, trying to stop them.
Yeah, it's got a ridiculous premise. It's
out of the gate.
Yeah, right out of the gate, it's a ridiculous premise because it's a superhero team that are rebelling against the organization that funded them because they found out that the organization, Hate, is actually the bad guys. It's like the A-Team. Yeah. Where they're like this like little group of freedom fighters that are on the run from like a bigger organization, but at the same time they're still trying to save the day and stuff like that.
Yeah.
John, why don't we give you a chance to talk here?
Okay.
When did you first read Nextwave?
I think I got it actually at the same time I picked up I Kill Giants.
Oh, perfect.
Because I had like fallen out of comic books. I hadn't really been like heavily reading a lot. I'd just been always writing. Mm-hmm. So I picked it up. I think I took it with me to Japan, and I think I might have even read it on the plane.
Okay.
But I loved it, and I just thought it was like hilarious. Because I think I'd read Transmetropolitan.
Mm-hmm.
But I think this was like, this was a lot different to me. Like, I don't know, when I read...
It is different than Transmet, for sure.
And I think when I read Transmet, I was a lot, I was a little younger. So it was like, I had a different mindset, but I really, it really made me like, okay, I could read more of this Warren Ellis guy.
That's funny. That's the similar thing with me. I read Transmet, I think that was probably the first Warren Ellis thing I read. Possibly. Mm-hmm. I'm not 100% on that, but I definitely read Transmetropolitan way before I read Nextwave, and it's like you say, Nextwave is the book that when I was younger I would have loved this book, and I mean obviously I do love it, but I mean like I would have like flipped out over this book, whereas Transmetropolitan I liked it because like I understood on a intellectual level that it was supposed to be really good, but I probably didn't get everything that was going on when I was first reading it.
Yeah.
And whereas Nextwave, there's not a whole lot to get other than the obscure references and the satire and the parody. Which that was one of the reasons I asked you when you read it, was because I'm curious to get Luke's opinion on this too. Because I'm almost positive, and this isn't meant to be derogatory in any way, Luke, but I'm sure that there were a good number of jokes that were completely lost on Luke. Well, for two reasons. Number one, it is kind of like pulling out of the weird small corners of the Marvel Universe that like even regular readers don't really know anything about. Mm-hmm. And two, when it came out in 2006 and 2007, and there's a lot of topical jokes in this comic that are specifically related to things that were going on in comics at that time. And so Luke, being somebody that wasn't plugged into the comic book community in 2006, I imagine that there were some things that you didn't quite catch the way, say, I would have caught it when I was reading it as the issues were coming out, at the same time as all these other books that they're making fun of.
Well, what's interesting is I'm sure there is things that slipped right over my head, but never at any point in time in the comic did I just go like, man, I don't understand like what they're saying. Like it still did a really good job of like keeping me in the loop enough to make me at least like laugh. Like sure. There's kind of a I know it's funny, but I don't know why it's funny thing.
Yeah.
There was a lot of stuff I did get, but then, how do I know what I didn't get,
Yeah. Well, I think what I meant is I think the style of the humor is all pretty much on its face. Like, it's not that you wouldn't get the jokes, it's that you wouldn't necessarily get the specific references, but you would still understand that it's comedy and that it's funny. That's why it's
which
fun.
I'm glad that was there. Like, I felt comfortable enough in it. So, do you have any specific examples, like what you're talking about? Like, references that you can think of?
The biggest one that stands out to me as being incredibly topical, I think, was issue number 9, which we're already kind of getting into the series here, but that's the issue where Elsa Bloodstone is wearing the shirt with the European flag.
Oh, yeah, yes.
Yeah, John, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about here.
Yeah.
And so they set up, at the beginning of the issue, she's got a big E on her shirt, and Tabitha, Boom Boom, they kind of have an argument because Tabitha is like an airhead, and they're talking about the European flag, and they're drawing a whole lot of attention to it, and that's the setup for a joke that's going to come at the end of the issue. And at the end of the issue, they're arguing with the villains. He says something like, oh, he calls her a victim. The guy that they're fighting calls her a victim, and she says, she gets all incredulous and she says, victim, and she points to her shirt. And the last page in this comic is a giant splash page of just her angrily pointing at her shirt, pointing at the E on her shirt, and the caption, or the word balloon is, do you think this letter on my chest stands for America?
Ironically enough, that is the one time I felt lost.
I was going to say, hey, do you understand? Because that's a very, very specific joke.
That was the one time that I went, I don't know what that means. Like, I laughed at the initial joke of her going, isn't that the flag for Europe? That flag sucks. Like, that was really funny, And then the final punchline, I no idea.
Mm-mm. Well, John, you know what that joke is, correct?
Yeah, it's reference. This is from the Ultimates, right?
Correct. Yes.
With Captain America,
mm-hmm.
where he tells him, like, was he fighting the Hulk? I think he was fighting the Hulk.
He was fighting. I think it was in the issue where he was fighting the Hulk. Correct.
Okay, and then like it was like surrender or something, and then he was like,
somebody makes a comment about surrendering.
And then he points to the A, and he's like, "You think this stands for France or something like that?"
That's correct.
I remember that. Yeah.
Captain America. This is in the Ultimates, which is the Ultimate Universe version of the Avengers. And this book was a huge deal when it came out. It was written by Mark Millar and drawn by Brian Hitch. And I think we had talked about this before in one of the podcasts, Luke. I'm trying to remember which one it would have been. But we talked about how it was in the Sleeper episode. We talked about how Marvel slowly adapted, like guys like Mark Millar and Ed Brubaker and Warren Ellis, what they were doing in their books, like The Authority and Planet.
We talked about that in Sleeper.
Yeah, and they adapted that into the Marvel Universe. And pretty soon the Marvel Universe started looking like a Wildstorm book. The Ultimates is one of the biggest books that did that. But yeah, so that was kind of a controversial moment in the Ultimates. I know most people liked it because it was supposed to be a joke, but it was also supposed to be kind of making fun of American bravado and, Captain America just angrily insulting France and, getting all in your face about how tough America is. So that was the joke in this, is that she points to the E and says, do you think this stands for America? But I'm going to go ahead and say that the fun thing about this issue is that there were multiple jokes on Mark Millar. That wasn't the only one. Because, of course, we're getting ahead of ourselves in the story, but this is the issue where the Nextwave squad has to fight the Beyond Corporation's team of superheroes. And one of the groups of superheroes, which this is yet another obscure reference, is the characters from Marvel's old comedy series, Not Brand Ech. In 1967, I think it was 67 and 68, somewhere in there, Marvel basically tried to make like a Mad Magazine style comic book, which was all just like making fun of their superheroes. So it had like Spidey Man and the characters that you saw in this issue of Nextwave that they make fun of. It has
Charlie America.
Yeah, Charlie America. And the mascot of Not Brand Etch was Forbush Man, which was the joke was that he was a guy wearing long underwear and he had a pot on his head and he had no superpowers whatsoever. And that he would defeat supervillains like through sheer dumb luck. And so that's kind of the character. Warren Ellis brings the character into this comic just because it's a comedy book, so he's just using all kinds of obscure Marvel history stuff. But on the page where they announce the new team, and they call them the Paramounts, or they call them the new Paramounts, that logo, that's the Ultimates logo.
Oh, is it really?
Yeah, and that drawing, that pose they're striking, is the Ultimates pose from the cover of the Ultimates. So this is very much a complete satire of the Ultimates. So there's that, and then there's the letter standing for America, and also this is a subtle joke, but I think it's really perfect. Or it's such a perfect mimic of Mark Millar's style of writing, because like one of Mark Millar's trademarks, I'm not sure if he still does this because I haven't read a Mark Millar comic in a long time, but I know that all the comics he was writing around this time, but nearly every issue ended with like a giant full page splash of a character shouting directly at the viewer. of like whatever was going on. If you read Civil War, I think the Civil War crossover was the last thing by Mark Millar that I read, and I didn't even read the whole thing. Next time you're looking at Civil War, go through it. Like every 22 pages, there's a splash page. Almost every 22 pages, because I think it was like, I remember counting at one point, but it was at least like 3/4 of the issues end with a character like screaming at the viewer. Like,
because I remember the Punisher one.
Yeah, exactly, like the Punisher, and that's like the cliffhanger. It's always a big reveal of the character, like, oh, something's happening, but it's the character just looking at the camera, shouting something, and so that's what this is too. Because the Captain America, this A doesn't stand for France, that was not a cliffhanger. That was like in the middle of the issue. But so Warren Ellis did a really good job of taking the joke that Mark Millar used and kind of making fun of it, but he's also doing it in a Mark Millar style, which I find really appropriate and hilarious.
What's really exciting about this book to me, among, obviously I like it, but I'm so excited to reread it and like catch stuff that I didn't see the first time, Like, this really seems like it rewards you for reading it multiple times book.
Yeah, because there's lots of like little things. I mean,
like you already just told me two. We've only been talking 20 minutes, and I already know two more things I didn't see.
Yeah, there's like a lot of little things that like the more you know about the Marvel Universe, kind of the more you understand the reference.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's important for the comedy. Yeah. Like, I don't think it's important to enjoy the book.
Because, no, like, I enjoyed it enough, and I laughed at plenty of the jokes.
Because at its heart, I think the whole book is just a complete spoof of superheroes. It's completely irreverent. It doesn't make, like, it doesn't even try to have, like, a deep plot or even make sense. Like, it doesn't really try to do anything. It just sets up, the first issue. We're going to rewind a little bit now because we've been talking about issue 9. We're going to rewind a little bit to issue 1. It just throws you right into the whole thing. The narration just says, this is Nextwave. This is hate. Nextwave is rebelling from hate because of, this. And now they're going to go beat people up. And that's it. And it's just like, here, never mind the story. Here's the action.
Well, I love that that's really all you need to know. Like, it's, you learn about the characters and their quirks with each other and everything, but it's like, they have a very, very loose plot, just like, hey, they're going to go beat people up and defeat these weapons. That's all you really need.
Yeah. It's like practically, it's like a setup for a video game,
Yeah. It really is.
Yeah.
Go beat this enemy to level up to level 5, and so on and so forth.
I'd play that game, though.
Oh, I would
play the crap out of this game.
Yeah.
Marvel could make, like, it's almost 10 years old at this point, but yeah, you could just make the most amazing Nextwave game because you could just fill it with Marvel jokes, fill it with obscure Marvel characters, and it's just a beat 'em up. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I was gonna say I would love to see like an old X-Men style beat 'em up of this. Oh god, I'd play that game so much.
So much.
But it was weird too. Fing Fang Foom was the absolute last person I expected to see in this book.
Mm-hmm.
That really, because I very, very loosely know about Fing Fang Foom. So, like, seeing him, I'm like, wait, what? Why are you here, of all people?
It's because Fin Fang Foom is, and just like an obscure Marvel thing, the repeating joke that they make is that Fin Fang Foom is a giant monster lizard, but for some reason he wears underpants.
Yes.
And that's just sort of like a embracing what comics are and just kind of making fun of how silly comics are. Because obviously the reason Fin Fang Foom wore underpants was because back then in the 50s and 60s, there was like all these rules about how you depict certain monsters, and Jack Kirby just drew him wearing underpants so they wouldn't have to deal with genitalia. The same reason they draw all their heroes with underpants, just because. I actually have no idea if that's true. I'm just assuming that's true. But like it's such a classic Kirby visual, but at the same time it makes sense in the context of a Jack Kirby comic, like in Fantastic Four, but it doesn't make sense like outside of that. And that's what this comic is making fun of. And then of course Ellis takes it a step further and makes funny jokes about how he doesn't have any genitalia and that's why he's angry. He has a burning desire to mate, but
he has no genitalia.
But he still has to wear underpants. And that's, again, kind of just the joke on the way the comics were depicted in the past.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, as much sense as it can make. Well, it's funny because this first issue, it's really over the top goofy and everything's all crazy.
Mm-hmm.
In the second issue, one thing that I noticed that was astounding was whenever Photon exits the ship in the second issue, she flies out of the ship. That color trail behind her, it's got that really pretty blue to orange gradient on it. The colors in this book were astounding.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that really makes this book work. I saw there's a quote from Warren Ellis where he talks about what he wanted to do with Nextwave, what Nextwave was. And he said something how Nextwave was the most pure superhero comic ever because it's just characters fighting. There's for very basic reasons, bad, good, that's it. And then they fight. And it's there's not a real big plot. It's just characters posing in the street and things exploding.
Yeah.
And the art definitely complements that because it's really bright, it's really colorful. It doesn't try to. It's almost like the complete opposite of what a lot of Warren Ellis's other superhero stuff does. Because Warren Ellis's other stuff is more of the whole this is what superheroes would be like in the real world kind of a thing.
Yeah.
His authority was definitely much more of this is a realistic science fiction take on the concept of a superhero, whereas Nextwave is pure superhero. It's not like the authority necessarily, and so the colors definitely play a part in that.
I was looking something up because my roommate was showing me a book the other day, and when I was explaining that we were doing Nextwave for our next episode, and he was showing me a book, and just serendipitously I saw Machine Man, Aaron Stack, on a panel, and it really kind of kicked me back into these characters. Some of them are actually established to a degree.
Yeah, that's actually something we should talk about.
Yeah.
Because what it actually is there's only one new character, and that's the Captain.
Oh, he's new. Okay.
He is a new character, but the joke, it's a good joke because the joke is that he's a guy with superpowers, and he's just called the Captain because every other version of Captain something has already been taken. Captain Marvel, Captain Power, Captain Lightning, and so he calls himself Captain Blank, Captain Expletive.
Yeah. And Captain America beats the piss out of him.
Yeah, Captain America beats him up.
Yeah, I love that. That was what? That's in the very beginning. That's the first page. I think that's the greatest introduction to a character.
Yeah, I like the Captain a lot, and he is a character that I think only appears in these 12 issues of Nextwave.
Because I haven't read a lot of Marvel since, and I was does he ever show up again? I don't think so.
No, I don't believe so. Nextwave, we kind of mentioned this earlier, but Nextwave kind of exists as its own thing. It's not that it's not happening in Marvel continuity. It's just that it doesn't need to happen in Marvel continuity.
Yeah.
Because it's a complete wacky comedy. So, they can
that it's disconnected.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
I absolutely like that. And that's another interesting thing when we kind of talk about context of what this book is and the time that it came out, because it came out right when Marvel was launching full swing into their big epic storyline summer crossover series.
Yeah.
Because House of M had come out maybe the year before and had been pretty popular. And while this was coming out, they were doing Civil War. And pretty much after Civil War, they started doing crossovers every year. And now we're at the point where it's just doing multiple crossovers a year. Everything is crossovers. And this definitely is a book that is not... It's not in tune with that. It's its own thing. You don't need to read any other books to understand it. You don't need to read it to understand any other books. It exists in its own little world.
Because there's that one cover, the one where it's it says Civil War, but then they're all holding signs and they're we don't care.
Yes.
And it's very much unapologetically we're not involved. We're our own thing. This is our own thing. We don't care about the Civil War. Yeah, I love that.
I loved that too. That cover is great. That's their Civil War tie-in cover. Because that was the thing. When Civil War came out, all of their covers were done in that style. So all the issues that had a tie-in had a cover in this style. And the Nextwave has one, but it's not related to Civil War at all. In fact, and it even has the Civil War logo, but then it has a little question mark behind it. No, it's good. But it's the kind of one-off quirky book that you don't see a whole lot of. And that's not even necessarily like a huge criticism, because as I said earlier, it's not like the book sold really well. It sold enough to get 12 issues, I guess. But after 12 issues, they decided they weren't going to do it anymore. And, Marvel is a business. I understand that they have to make these kind of decisions. It's not like they were, it's not like they were like deliberately trying to like cut down a favorite property that millions of fans
enjoyed. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's definitely like this tiny, it's a tiny little thing that just kind of exists on its own. And that's what makes it so great. But, that's just my opinion,
right?
Man.
But it's, We've talked about this before, even outside of the podcast. It's really nice when a writer can just focus on making a good story, and not have to focus on it fitting in the continuity.
Right.
Because then they don't have to go to the editor, and the editor goes, oh well, you need to change this because this event that we're going to do. That just gets tiresome. Mm-hmm. It gets overwhelming after a while. I wish I remembered what book Derek showed me that had Machine Man in it, but I recognized the.
I'm gonna make a guess. Was it Earth X?
No.
Oh, then I have no idea.
Yeah, it was something else, but I'll figure it out.
Yeah.
But I really liked Machine Man. How he was so like almost a believable person kind of thing. Like specifically the scene that I'm thinking of is the scene in. What issue was it in? The scene with the Celestials.
Yes.
Aaron Stack.
Yeah.
That was,
oh man.
That was probably one of my favorite issues. Which that's another thing I was going to bring up was a lot of the comedy, like some of the best. I shouldn't say a lot of the comedy, but I should say I think some of the best comedy actually comes from just the cutaway jokes.
Yeah, the little non sequitur.
Yeah, the little non sequiturs, but they're not completely pointless. It's just it always will just like cut away to like a moment in a character's past and give you like a funny little joke. And that one was probably one of my favorites. Was when they're all ganging up on Machine Man and they keep giving him an expletive, because that's one of the other jokes in the series is that whenever anybody curses, it's just the same 4 little skull and crossbones symbols.
Yeah.
Which is played to good effect because the same symbols is used interchangeably for any kind of curse. So you can't really figure out exactly what they're trying to say. You can make up your own curse word for sure, but it just sounds funny when you just read it out as like blank. Because that one, they're all like, "You're total blank." Oh yeah, you're a blank.
Yeah.
And then it like flashes back. That's where the joke where he says like, I met the Celestials, and it flashes back to him with the Celestials, and the Celestials are like, "You're a blank. You spent a year with us, and we can't stand you." And that panel with the big red Celestial making the L loser hand like on his forehead.
Yeah.
Is my favorite panel for so long. Just think these like classic Jack Kirby characters like arguing with them, like calling each other names and just being stupid to each other. That was funny.
That was another one of the scenes in the comic that very audibly made me laugh out loud.
The part with the koalas.
That part. God.
That was probably one of the other best jokes.
It's coincidentally both in the same issue. So,
if I recall, I remember when it first came out, I was wondering how this was going to act on a reread, because when it first came out, I felt like the first few issues were good, but it wasn't maybe until like issue 4 that I thought it got like really funny. And it really, really picked up like in issue 4 and issue 5. Just the panel of the hate soldiers, like just with like giant boxes, these giant crates, and they're just dumping them out of their the Aero Marine, dropping them from the sky, and they're just like crying.
Yes.
They can't stand to see these like cute little birds being dropped out of a plane.
I love too the follow up right after the Death Bears, how they send the flight soldiers out and they're all in pterodactyl suits.
Oh yeah, the Ptero Men.
Oh my goodness. It was bordering on that like so obscenely random. It gave me like sort of a vibe of like a Joan and Vasquez thing. It's so obscene. It's just so out of context that it also kind of makes sense, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, it's just like, it's that total like bizarre, far out. It's the type of thing that you see in comics, but like it's just played so so over the top But yeah, I mean, like guys in pterodactyl suits, murderous death bears, like these. I mean, these are the kind of things that you see in old comics. But it's just really funny the way it's presented in this book.
I love that whole set, like right there where they were like in the fields and they were fighting like the samurai robots and it just kept building, and like it was like the crabs with rockets on them and all that, like it was just so ridiculous.
Yeah, it was because like that was the whole thing was hate. They were going to kill Nextwave once and for all, so they're just like launching all these secret weapons at him, and it's just like one ridiculous thing after the other. Made for a lot of good visuals. We were talking about the characters, about how the captain is the only original character.
Everyone else has already been established at one point or another.
Yeah. All the other characters come from like they're basically just like small unused characters. Tabitha, Boom Boom, I think that was her code name, Boom Boom.
Yeah,
she was in X Factor.
I think so.
Yeah, it was X Factor because I remember her. Let's see, I'm thinking now it was Executioner's Song.
Or was it like X4? Because there's
it was
joke
X
in there somewhere.
I'm sorry, X Factor was the Peter David book with Havoc and Multiple Man and Strong Guy. Yeah, sorry, it's all coming back to me now. Oh my god. She was X Force with Cable.
Yeah, because there was that Cable joke.
That was the brilliant joke. Yes.
Oh my god.
Well, the way it's drawn, Cable, like the flashback to Cable and his gun, and the gun is actually just a big girder. Like it's actually a girder with just like handles and like little bombs drawn on it and things.
So she was from X-Force with Cable.
Yeah, she was from X-Force. Monica Rambeau, she was a character that had been around for a while. She was Captain Marvel at one point. She was in the Avengers as Photon. They're even using her now again in something else.
Yeah. But she's like Quasar, Captain Quasar, something.
She's had a lot of identities. She kind of gets rolled out whenever Marvel needs a black female character.
Pretty much.
Obviously, they don't have enough of those, so she just kind of becomes like every black female character, which is sad and insulting and humorous all at the same time. But yeah, her Aaron Stack, the Machine Man. Funny, a little trivia for you. I'm sure most comic book guys know this, but Machine Man actually was made his first appearance in the 2001 A Space Odyssey comic, written and drawn by Jack Kirby. Marvel had the rights to do an adaptation of 2001 A Space Odyssey, and Kirby did maybe 10 issues. And by the way, they're great comics. I really recommend them. Just like really far out, pure classic 70s crazy Kirby. But yeah, that's where Machine Man comes from. And he eventually got like spun off into his own series by Kirby and then kind of got integrated into the Marvel Universe. And that's why we see him in Nextwave.
I didn't know that. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. He was also the reason I brought up Earth X earlier, Luke, when you asked about the comic that your friend showed you, was because he was kind of like the main character of that series, that was a mini series done in like 99, 2000. And that was sort of like if Marvel had an Elseworlds line, that's what that would have been. But Marvel doesn't have Elseworlds. That's a DC trademark comic. So Marvel just did this other thing called Earth X, which was sort of like an alternate future of the Marvel Universe, but it was all like narrated by Machine Man and the Watcher. Oh, and then the other character in Nextwave was Elsa Bloodstone, who was a relatively recent character.
Yeah.
But she's the daughter of Ulysses Bloodstone. But not a character that has a lot of use in Marvel's like dramatic superhero crossover stories. So Nextwave is the perfect place for her. So yeah, it's that weird little quirky book made up of these characters that really don't have anything to do in the Marvel Universe as a whole, and they work really well together. Although, their personalities in this book are pretty much crafted just for this book. They're like tangentially related to how they appeared before. But that doesn't really bother me because, it's, as we said, like with this book kind of operating as its own thing, it works.
Yeah, I totally, because I think I read something, and I think after I read this, and I think Machine Man was in there like only for a little bit, but he was nothing like the Nextwave version, and I was kind of like not disappointed, but I was a little sad. I was like, oh, I thought he'd say something funny or something, but it was like a serious book.
Yeah, no, Machine Man, pretty much the way he acts in Nextwave, that's the only. He doesn't act like that.
The only time, yeah.
It's the only time he acts like that, which is too bad because the Nextwave version of Machine Man is great.
Yeah.
I also love the visual comedy of, and this is something that's like only done in a book where you just accept that it's just like ridiculous, over the top comedy, and you don't have to think about it. I love the comedy about how he's a robot, so he could just pull out various like machines and devices of his body at time. So like he'll just like frequently turn his fingers into like knives and scissors and like a corkscrew and just like a flamethrower, like whatever. And I love the way that is Immonen draw that. I think it's in the second issue when they defeat Fin Fang Foom by having Fin Fang Foom swallow the Machine Man. So Machine Man is just inside Fin Fang Foom, and he just like opens up his chest, and it's just like a pocket knife. Like all these like buzz saws and giant saws and knives and stuff just pop out, and he just starts chopping up Fin Fang Foom from the inside. That's a really good just like visual. But I mean, it's the kind of thing that like people wouldn't accept in a serious science fiction superhero comic, which is too bad because they're missing out on a lot of fun.
I think two of my favorite episodes are not episodes. I'm thinking of it as a cartoon.
Funny because it really does feel like that. But go on.
Yeah.
Yeah, two of my favorite issues were when they introduced the Dormammu parody.
Yes. Oh, yeah. I loved that story arc.
Me too.
Well, and that's another thing too. We should say one of the unique things about this book, because we have talked before about decompression in comic book writing.
Yes.
And Warren Ellis is actually one of the guys that's, he's a big widescreen comics writer. He's a guy who writes decompressed comics. But what makes Nextwave so unique, even among his catalog of books, is that it's almost very strictly structured with 2-issue story arcs. So it's every other issue, there's a new story starting. So every odd issue starts a new story arc, and every even issue concludes the story arc from the previous issue, which gives the book a nice pace. It was also like
all of this was a pretty quick.
Yeah,
read.
It's a very quick read because it's still, as I said, it's still widescreen comics. Like it's still on very purposefully. It's not very deep. It's not very dense. The bulk of the comic is just the art. And just it's just Immonen drawing awesome, cool stuff that you don't see anywhere else. And then Warren Ellis' job is to basically just write jokes, funny captions for what you're seeing. So it's a 12-issue series, but that means there's a solid like 6 stories in it, which is honestly, again, talking about the times that the book came out, that was pretty novel at the time. Yeah, because we're talking about a time when, like, Brian Michael Bendis was and still is kind of like the go-to Marvel guy, and the standard was 6-issue story arcs.
Yeah,
like the standard was every book is right for the trade paperback. So yeah, this book definitely stood out in that respect too. But yeah, as you were saying, Luke, the issue with Dormammu, or I don't think they called him Dormammu. They called him...
It's Rorkanu.
Yeah, Rorkanu. Yeah, which was such an obvious...
Right, like, I saw his look, and I'm like, he kind of looks like Dormammu. I don't know if this is intentional or not.
Right.
Then it says his name, and I'm like, oh, yep, there it is.
Yeah,
okay.
It's 100... Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and, he's a commander over the Silent Realm, I think is what they called it. They don't actually use the actual realm that Dormammu is over. Just that entire arc was just so unbelievably funny, like, even compared to the rest of the book.
Yeah, that was one of the best, like, one of the funniest ones.
Yeah.
Well, like, when he summons the mindless ones from the Silent Realm, and they're just like walking around, just they're all sitting in a bar and they're all waiting at the bus stop, and
there's so many good jokes. There's just that issue is probably also like the most, like, the least written issue. Like,
I was just about to say that. Like,
it's probably the most pages out of any of the issues. That's because there's so many great jokes. Of the mindless ones are just taking over this small town in Idaho, I think it is.
They even make a reference that they forget what the town is.
Yeah,
At the very end of the book, or at the very end of that arc, they go, and now Nextwave Squad leaves the town that I've already forgotten what it's called. Something like that. But like, prior to this arc, I kept telling myself, man, the dialogue's really funny. And then that arc hits, and I was like, this is all just visual humor.
Well, it's just so many panels of the mindless ones, just sort of like in like everyday person costumes, and you just have all these setup panels of like, mindless ones, like waiting at a bus stop. My favorite one is the way the issue 8 starts, the second half of the story, with them all snapping and doing the Jets walk.
Yeah.
Like all like walking down the street, and it just has the Nextwave logo, and then the caption is just "Dance Critters."
Yes.
Which that's another stylistic thing about this book, is that it's just the Nextwave logo and a caption are just like all over this book. Like anytime something cool happens, it's "You have been reading Nextwave, and here's a funny caption about what you just saw." So it's very in your face about just like how much fun it's having.
Yeah. Since you've heard their theme song, when you see that Nextwave Splash logo, do you imagine the theme song playing?
That is exactly what I imagine.
Yep.
Which, for those of you who are listening, they released Nick Lowe, the editor of the book. He and his band recorded a theme song for Nextwave, and they put it out on like their MySpace page. I don't know if you can still find it on the internet. I downloaded it and have it backed up somewhere, and I occasionally listen to it because it's a funny little song. But yeah, it's just like a chorus of people going Nextwave, and then just like explosions and guitars and.
I mean, that's pretty typical Nextwave, just from the little bit I know of them.
Yeah.
So Nextwave, right?
Yeah. But man, I love that arc so much. Just all of the and not to discredit the dialogue from this arc either, because all of the times that what's his name, Workanu, he kept saying, I really do like those suicide girls.
The joke about how he wants women. Like he's like,
yes, he goes women, and Cash is okay too.
He hates women, but he hates all humans. But those suicide girls are pretty nice. Good jokes. I also love that issue has the good Elsa Bloodstone backstory of father training her. And,
oh my god. He just throws her in the pit with that monster, and she walks out with a bloody spoon.
He just gives her a spoon, and he's like, "You have to kill this monster," and just throws her
Make me proud.
And of course, she's a baby, and she does it. And then the next joke is, she has to circumcise
the hideous Felch monster.
Yeah.
The Bihar province or something.
Yeah. And it's like this big weird demon wearing a diaper.
Because that's a thing apparently.
Yeah.
It's just playing off that whole Fing Fang Foom dynamic that we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what it is. A big weird monster wearing a diaper. It's good humor, and I also love that the story ends with the captain just beating the crap out of Rokaku, whatever.
Oh my god! And then Photon walks in, or Monica walks in, and she's like, "Is that him?"
Yeah.
And then he says some expletive like, "I'll be back to beep you" or something, and she goes, and you just see her walk off panel towards him.
Well, it's such a good joke. I just love the joke of Cap goes crazy and starts destroying Rokaku, and then the next page Tabitha, the rest of the team show up and they're like, "Hey, looks like you did it. What happened?" "Oh my god!" And they're going up when they see him. Yeah.
I love that he dunked his head in the toilet.
Yeah, he gave him
Of course. Because, what else is going to work on a person whose head is fire?
His head is made of flames, so he puts him in the toilet and gives him a swirly, and now he's just a body with no head.
Well, of course. Oh man, that issue made me laugh so many times.
Yeah.
Or those two issues. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I think those two might have been my favorite out of the whole book. I really like the Death Bear stuff. But that through and through, I think was my favorite.
Well, like I said, I think one of the things that makes this a fun read is that it keeps getting better as it goes on.
Yes.
I do think that it like the comedy was there in the first couple of issues, but like it really keeps building, and like they kind of find their groove like in the 4th and 5th issues, and they really ride it really good. Yeah, and so like each like story is like funnier than the last.
Because right after this arc, they get into the they go to the abandoned town and find all the
that's what
and then they release
Ultimate's jokes.
Right, and we already talked about that plenty.
Yeah. Well, and the one thing I also didn't talk about, the other Mark Millar joke in that issue, is that the other superhero teams are also parodies of Mark Millar's run on the Authority, because Mark Millar did the Authority after Warren Ellis left it, and he like brought in a bunch of I don't remember, it's been a long time since I read it, but I remember there being like other characters. There was like a story arc where like Mark Millar like made a bunch of like new teams with the Authority, and that's what the joke here was that the Beyond Corporation just has like all these different superhero teams, and they're all in the style of like a Mark Millar Authority superhero team. Like they're all like thematic, like the surgery, and they're all like doctors, and the vestry, and they're all like religious symbols. Those are all parodies of Mark Millar's run on Authority. I'm pretty positive. If anybody out there knows otherwise, feel free to correct me. But yeah, I did enjoy that issue a lot. One of the things we didn't talk about when we were talking about it at the beginning of the comic, stylistically, I loved that story because they're in the fake town, and then the upside down floating castle shows up. And so every time the villains on the upside down floating castle are shown, they're drawn upside down. And it just makes for like fun visuals. The pages look upside down, but the dialogue is right side up.
What's so funny about that is by this point in the comic, I literally just stopped questioning it. Like, up until then, I'm like, okay, why is this happening? Why are there these koalas that are killing them? And then when it's upside down, it didn't even remotely faze me. I'm just like, oh, they're upside down, okay. Whatever.
Yeah. It makes for an interesting read, though. I like it because, like, the issue, like issue number 9, like half the pages are upside down.
Yep.
Like, if you just randomly opened up to a page, you would think you had the comic wrong, but it...
So, this, Forbush guy, Forbush man, is that...
Forbush man.
Yeah. What's, like, you explained briefly that he was just kind of the mascot with no powers originally.
Mm-hmm.
What was his deal in this issue?
Well, let's talk about that.
Yeah, because that got really weird really fast.
Yeah, so that was issue 10. I freaking loved that issue because I love when comics do this kind of a thing. It should be very obvious that I loved it because I actually like completely stole this idea sort of for a Zero's Heroes story that I did. But I loved Warren Ellis gives Forbush Man a power. And the power is that he can allow people to live out alternate lives inside their own brains, essentially. So, what kind of a power that is, who knows, because it's not really spelled out. But the effect of it is that when they go to fight Forbush Man, everything cuts away, and we see all of the characters in their own little alternate realities. And you just get these like little mini 3-page stories of each character. And they are all drawn in a different style. So let's see. They show it like Captain Marvel. It's done in like a classic. I think it is Neil Adams style of comic. It's definitely like a classic 70s superhero comic. Like she's drawn in like the old school Kree Captain Marvel uniform. It's got the Ben-Day dot coloring going on, and it's like all like real like acid trippy. And then I don't remember what the style of Machine Man's story was supposed to be, but that is supposed.
It looked like a kind of like a news like comic strip paper.
Yeah, because it was all strictly. He
was working tech support, or he was working claims
insurance
thing. Yeah, insurance claim thing. That one was hilarious.
Yeah, no, that one was great, where he's trying to explain to the woman his job.
And he ends up just beating his head off, and then
smashing his face with a gear.
Yep. And then the very last panel is him just answering the phone again, going, this is Aaron Stack, how can I help you? And he's got no head.
Yeah. And then, Captain Universe, that was another one. Again, I'm not a very good comic book fan because I don't remember specifically what style this is supposed to be. But although I do, here's a reference I do get. If you remember reading the issue when the Captain Universe is sitting on like this beach and there's all these giant heads around him. Those heads are Jack Kirby and Stan Lee.
Stan Lee, yeah.
And then the Elsa Bloodstone one is very obviously Mike Mignola.
Yeah,
I get that one very clearly. If you like Luke, you are familiar with Mike Mignola.
Yeah. I just
he did the Batman Elseworlds, Gotham by Gaslight.
Yeah, I know who it is now.
Yeah, yeah, that's like very obviously his style, and that's what I'm very familiar with because I've read a lot of Mike Mignola comics. So that's like a fun, it's just like a fun little diversion of all these characters just kind of like trapped in their own
like personal hell.
Personal hell. That's what it is. It's like they're trapped in their own personal hell. And then I love the joke. How he's like, I beat them all. And then Tabitha is standing there, boom, boom. And she's like, well, what about me? You didn't beat me. And he's, his whole thing? He's like,
he essentially says like his
powers transport the mind.
Yeah, and you have none.
My powers transport the mind, but you do not appear to have one. And her response is Zomg.
Yeah, ZOMG.
And then she blows him up.
Yep. Because
that's the running joke throughout the whole series that they've been playing her off as like this big Paris Hilton airhead style of character. And so that's how she beats the bad guys, because she's an airhead and he can't control her brain because she doesn't have one. It's a pretty like satisfying conclusion of her character.
For what it's worth, I don't think you've said trope one time this podcast.
Take that, Ed.
So I love MODOK. I absolutely adore MODOK. Every single thing about him. It's just so uncomfortably hilarious. Everything about him.
Yeah.
So when they go into those big splash panels of them fighting their way through the city that they come across, and there's just all these big, very splash panels of these like absolutely ridiculous villains that are grunts that they're fighting. The Elvis MODOK that comes in, it's literally just MODOK with shades and Elvis hair.
Oh, it's an Elvis.
Yeah, I was drinking something, and I literally spit it out. I laughed so unbelievably hard. Especially, I don't know if that has been a thing before, if the Elvis MODOK was in this book originally, but that ended up coming back in Marvel vs. Capcom 3.
Oh, did it?
MODOK is a character in that, and that's his alternate costume.
Oh, that's a good one. Okay, good.
Yeah, I don't know if that is like an actual thing, or if that was from this book, but I hope it's just from this book, because it's nice to see that they dug that deep to get that in.
No, I'm pretty sure the Elvis MODOKs were from this book. And,
okay, then that's really neat.
They shoot little cheeseburgers. So funny.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, that sequence. That's where like sort of like building up to this ultimate pointless fight climax. That issue they finally, like the story, the quote unquote story, is that they're trying to stop the Beyond Corporation from releasing all these like weird weapons on the American public. So they find the Beyond Corporation's secret, invisible, floating fortress, and they're just they just like get there and they're like, all right, let's just fight our way through. So there are 6 splash pages. Not splash pages, double page spreads, which is like, again, such a a satire of superhero comics and their prevalence, especially, again, talking about the time that it came out. Double page spreads were something that you saw in almost every issue of a Bendis comic. And so there was like 6 of them in a row of them just fighting weird, bizarre creatures. And then there was the Nextwave logo with a little caption. And I was just saying silly things. And then my favorite one was probably either Nextwave. You must buy 6 copies of this comic now, because the joke was that you're supposed to buy 6 copies so you can line up all the splash pages to like get the full effect. That one, or Nextwave blatantly wasting your money since 2006, something like that. Yeah, blatantly wasting your money since 2006. But I loved, the Elvis Modocs were probably my favorite. I really liked the Brontosaurus Cyclopses.
Yeah.
It's just weird.
I loved, I think it was like the second one, where it was the Stephen Hawking character
Oh my
in
God,
like, a wheelchair shooting I-beams.
The army of Stephen Hawkings with like
they even do a little quote about that too with the logo. I can't remember what the quote is. It's like,
Nextwave know that science is a trick on white people.
oh my God.
I like the gargoyle chimney sweeps.
Oh yeah, those were great. Yeah, just some crazy, fun, bizarre stuff.
Yeah.
But so it kind of like builds into the big climax where they find out who is in charge of the Beyond Corporation. And so Luke, having said how much you like MODOK, I'm sure you enjoyed the joke that
I'm just laughing thinking about it.
yeah.
I screen capped that panel of the reveal just so I can use it everywhere. I'm going to use it on forums. I'm going to use it on my Skype picture.
Yeah,
so the reveal is that it's a baby MODOK.
Baby MODOK, yeah.
I mean, it's even got like a little pink chair that it's sitting in too. It's not like just a small MODOK. It's a baby MODOK.
It's got a baby face. It's got a little like, and I love too that it's because they've established the Marvel Universe has a MODAM.
Yep.
Which is a female MODOK. And so the joke is that MODOK and MODAM got together and made a MODOK baby.
Ugh.
Like, I forget what he says, like by the
light of a rack of World of Warcraft servers.
Yeah, exactly. Just a bunch of computer nerds getting their baby on.
But that was a pretty great reveal. I was very happy to see that.
But in true comic book mystery red herring fashion, there is no mystery to figure out who's behind the Beyond Corporation. There's never any clues. It's not like part of the story at all. But that doesn't stop them from having multiple reveals of who is secretly behind the whole thing. So the MODOK baby, the baby MODOK, that was a good joke. I was really happy with that reveal. But then they have to one-up it again, and they reveal who's really in charge, which is such a great visual. It's Devil Dinosaur. So you have a red Tyrannosaurus Rex wearing like a
smoking jacket.
Holding like a wine of champagne, and he's got like a weird oversized pistol.
Yeah, I remember because when he shoots the baby MODOK, the bullet is like as big as MODOK.
It just obliterates him.
There's like nothing left of him.
And Devil Dinosaur is decked out like a classic Bond villain.
Is Devil Dinosaur an actual character?
Oh yeah, Devil
Mother of God.
It's an old Jack Kirby comic.
Like real old
real old, yeah. Devil Dinosaur and Moon Boy. That's the joke. Moon Boy is his little monkey companion, and Devil Dinosaur. I love the reveal because like he does his big speech where he's like, I'm going to kill all the humans and return everything to the Jurassic period. And Monica's like, I don't buy it. What did that human do to you? Who hurt you so bad?
And then he just keeps, turning away like, I'm not telling.
I don't know.
I shan't tell.
Yeah. Nope, I shan't.
And then finally he just breaks down. He just is like, look at him. He's riding on my back, like disrespecting me, blah, blah. I'm shocked that is a real character.
Oh, yeah. That's real.
I loved that when he pulled the crumpled up picture, it was just that old panel from the comic, yeah.
I think that's like the cover of like the first issue or something, or like that issue.
Yeah, that's the original like Jack Kirby cover.
It's weird that like it almost makes me want to like look into Devil Dinosaur, but I know that like it's going to be like a real character, and I'm just going to be let down.
No, I mean it's a Jack Kirby comic. It's actually I should correct myself. It's not actually like really, really old because it's actually from the late 70s.
Okay, yeah.
That's from when Jack Kirby came back to Marvel after he quit Marvel in like 1970. Jack Kirby quit Marvel and went to DC, and then he was at DC for like about 7 years, and then he came back to Marvel and started doing just like weird non-superhero stuff mostly. That's when Kirby did the Eternals, which was also spoofed in this comic. That's when he did the Silver Surfer graphic novel, and he also did Devil Dinosaur, which I don't know. I don't know a whole lot about Devil Dinosaur. I'm not sure how long it lasted. Yeah, it was just like a weird little like Jack Kirby monster comic.
But it's cute that they brought him back. That they made him a character in this. In true fashion to the rest of the comic, they dug pretty deep. And
they dug deep and obscure. So it makes for a good villain. This is the kind of thing that I like to see. It's perfect for this comic. They're still fun. It's still great that they exist, and I'm glad that somebody's doing something with them. Yeah, pretty much they just like kill Devil Dinosaur. They drop
with like no trouble whatsoever.
Yeah, they just they're in like the floating city, and they just like drop him off the city. He's in like the giant chamber room, is like a giant sphere, like a Disney World kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Just like blow it up and kick it off, and it just like crashes into the mountain.
And then that was it.
Oh no, Tabitha blows it up. That's what happened.
Yeah.
So of course the whole thing ends with an explosion.
Well, it has to.
Yeah.
But that was pretty much it. Then they just say, they just leave it on a, if they want to continue it, they can thing.
Yeah, exactly. Like they could have done more with it if they wanted to, but it pretty much came to a conclusion, and it was satisfying.
Yeah, it was a satisfying ending.
Mm-hmm.
Do you guys realize that we went the whole time, and I don't think we talked about Dirk Anger one time?
Holy God!
I was about to bring that up. I was just gonna say. So the one huge part of this comic that we haven't talked about at all is the character of Dirk Anger.
Well, it sucks because I there was a couple times I was gonna bring him up, but I was like, it doesn't really make sense what we're talking about.
Well, you don't want to go off on too many tangents, but
that's a third word that you say a lot, tangent.
Tangents. Yes.
That's okay though.
Yeah.
So let's talk about Dirk Anger. I loved Dirk Anger. Obviously, very obviously, a parody of Nick Fury. The whole Hate organization, everything is a parody of S.H.I.E.L.D. They do such a good job with the parody of the Helicarrier.
Yeah, the Aeromarine.
It's an Aeromarine, so it's like a jet submarine flying around in the sky. I think it's modern readers. Somebody today would read this, and they would very obviously draw similarities to this comic book and the Adult Swim show Venture Brothers.
That's where I'm sitting at. I saw so many comparisons to stuff that Venture Brothers was doing, not knowing that this came first, right?
It came before most of the
prominent Venture Brothers things.
Well, specifically the character of Hunter. His stuff with Venture Bros. This comic predates most of that. But the thing is like part of the reason that they're so similar is because they're obviously parodying a lot of the same source material. The difference is that Venture Bros, they're not just parodying Nick Fury, they're also parodying Hunter Thompson, the writer. So it's like the character of Hunter Gathers in Venture Brothers is a combination of Nick Fury and Hunter Thompson, whereas the character of Dirk Anger is very obviously just like a super over-the-top Nick Fury.
Yes.
And the character is great. I love that he chews lizard sticks.
Yeah.
Or does he smoke them? I can't remember.
I don't think he ever smokes them.
Well, because that's another topical joke. Because around this time would have been when Marvel enacted their edict that none of their characters will ever smoke in their comic books, and that's why Wolverine stopped smoking. Nobody smoked. I think a few cigarettes might have snuck in here and there, but if you actually go through every Marvel comic book published since 2005, you won't find any characters ever smoking. Because Joe Quesada, who at the time was editor-in-chief of Marvel, made a mandate that they're not going to show any of their characters smoking. It was his decision. I don't necessarily think it was a wrong decision. It's their comics, and it's up to them how they want to depict them.
Yeah.
So that was the joke, was that, Nick Fury used to always be shown smoking. He's always smoking a cigar, just like Wolverine. Well, Nick Fury stopped smoking, in the comics. So Dirk Anger, he's got these lizard sticks, which are I'm not sure what they're supposed to be necessarily, but he's always got one sticking out of his mouth. Just this weird little made up product. I love how perfectly over the top anger.
Literally everything about him, as far as dialogue, his like weird obsession with his mom's dress.
Yeah. Okay, I just double checked the dates. Hunter first appeared in Venture Brothers in 2006.
Okay, so it was right around the same time.
Yeah, but Dirk. They play Dirk so well because he's such a like. There's lots of jokes about how this like over the top masculinity, like he's smoking booze and he's a misogynist, like he doesn't like women. He's everything is like gotta be ultra masculine, blow things up all the time. But he's completely unhinged. And he like can't deal with any problem. Like he's suicidal. Like he's constantly trying to kill himself. And
like he's got that giant gun.
Yeah, that was my favorite joke. So there's lots of good visual jokes, and I have a lot of favorite jokes in this comic, but that was one of them where he's got this giant gun, and the gun barrel like loops around so that it's pointing backwards, and he's sitting on top of the gun with the barrel pointing at him, and he's playing Russian roulette. And he's got this big lever that pulls the trigger. And like those subordinates are outside the door, like trying to talk to him, like, we need you to come do this thing. And he's like, not right now. And he's trying to like playing Russian roulette with this giant, ridiculous suicide gun. And like he's got mommy issues. He's a cross dresser, like because that's how. As I think you had said that earlier, Luke. That's how Machine Man they're able to defeat him because Machine Man breaks into his room and steals his favorite dress.
Yep,
and
threatens to burn it, right?
Yeah, he threatens to burn it.
And then that sends him into a straight spiral, like more of an unhinged spiral than we've seen prior to this.
Yeah,
and then he actually succeeds in killing himself.
Yeah, I mean that's another good joke is that he actually does commit suicide accidentally. Yeah, because that's the whole thing is when he's like trying to commit suicide and they convince him not to because they're going to give him the Paramounts, which are the parody of the Ultimates, and so he's like, oh, all right, let's get this in full gear. And he's got a noose around his neck, and he's like standing on a wobbly stool, and he accidentally falls off the stool and kills himself. But he comes back because they just turned him into a zombie, so why not?
He's like, he even makes a joke of it too. He's like, they gave me a dang zombie switch. Couldn't let me just die.
I think one of my favorite visuals is early on when they're chasing Nextwave, and he like demands alcohol, so he's got like this bottle of whiskey, and like I don't remember, something happens, and he just like bites off the bottle of whiskey in his mouth, like he's like so happy, he's like cheering, and there's just like this broken bottleneck in his mouth. It's a good joke. He's definitely a good villain that completely, again, just kind of playing to the whole like parody of superheroes, and definitely like it's satirizing, but also paying homage to the Marvel Universe.
Yeah.
So it's like loving satire,
Yeah.
And just that whole like making fun of the whole Shield, Nick Fury, like there's an acronym for every organization, and everything is like first it's one way, then it's the other, and and nothing really makes sense. That's pretty much the story of this comic.
Hate was the highest anti-terrorism effort.
Highest terrorism effort.
Like hilarious.
And I forget what Silent was, because that was the whole thing. Was Silent was the terrorist group that turned into the Beyond Corporation that was funding hate to stop Silent.
Yeah, Derek continually, like in the first issue, they kept making note of that. Like that's just what Silent became. You can't blame them for that.
Faith-based funding. I don't think they ever explain that acronym for Silent. I don't think they ever do.
It might not have. Not that it, matters.
It doesn't matter, yeah.
It's a fun, unique little comic.
It really is a shame that they never did anything more.
Yeah, I would like to see more. I mean, like, I really like the characters in the book, but it's kind of what we said. Like, it's a shame because, like, the characters, they're really only the way they are in these issues.
Yeah.
Marvel will do stuff with Monica Rambeau. They will continue to do stuff with Machine Man, every now and then, whenever they want to.
But they're these characters.
Exactly. They're not going to be the Nextwave versions of them.
I was going to say, because I read like the new Captain Marvel, and she was in it for a bit, and it was just like a completely, it's like the serious version. So it's not the same. Yeah.
Yeah, I loved the ongoing joke about how she would always talk about how she used to lead the Avengers.
Yeah.
And it's like anytime something would happen, she'd be like, "Oh, this reminds me of when I was leading the Avengers."
And everyone was so sick of it.
Yeah.
That was great.
It was funny because when you said we were doing Nextwave, this was another one that you didn't tell me a thing about. So I'm really glad you didn't, specifically on this one, because I feel like that would have took a little bit of the magic away from it.
Yeah, I've been trying to keep you as in the dark as possible.
Yeah, I like that dynamic.
Because I think it works pretty well. Like going into, like I said, like I knew a bit about the characters and stuff, but I didn't know about specifically the characters in this book. So I got to go into it blind, and I think that makes it so much more enjoyable.
I agree.
Yeah, I think because a lot of this book, as we said, it's just sort of like irreverent and over the top. So there is like a surprise factor to a lot of the comedy. Because it's just not the type of thing that you normally read in a Marvel comic. So it kind of plays with your expectations, of like what you would expect and then what they actually give you. I mean, if you go into it understanding that, I think you'll still enjoy it.
No, yeah.
It still looks amazing,
Oh yeah. No, it was a really good, and I think this is like for me, this is the stuff that Marvel does that I really enjoy, where it's kind of like they take a character and it's not like a prominent character, and they're kind of like off in their own little, like I read like the new Hawkeye, and it wasn't like, or at least, and it was kind of like, it was humorous, and it wasn't, it was kind of its own self-contained, like he's off doing his own thing. Because I think the whole thing was what he did on his days off or something like that.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's a great example of this type of book. Yeah, that's a perfect example of like it's not the same type of comedy as Nextwave, but it's this type of like book that kind of exists on the fringes of the Marvel universe, and it's purposely not trying to tie into everything, and it's purposely just trying to give you this quirky little unique story about this character kind of doing his own thing.
Yeah.
And I like when Marvel does that, and I like that I like that they do that,
Yeah, cuz I feel like it's with, like I love Marvel, but a lot of the stuff, it is like, oh my god, these books right now, they're going to turn into an event comic, and then, everything's going to change, and then it's another event comic, and then you get these things that are kind of it's more accessible.
Yeah.
For people who get like event comic fatigue or whatever. Like it's like these open comics you can just go into blind with no need to read like 60 tie-in issues.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it's these kind of books are nice.
Yeah, I love them.
Me too.
So would you say that's Nextwave?
So, I don't know. I think that about covers everything we got to say about Nextwave.
I'm glad that you had me read all of them. I initially was like, oh man, I gotta read 6 more issues. That sucks. But I feel like it really is better to talk about it just kind of as a whole, since it's short.
We were first talking about just like splitting it up and doing 6 issues and then the next 6 issues like in another episode. And then like I read through the first 6 issues and I was like, I forgot how quickly these read.
Yeah.
Because it's not like it's dense comics by any means. So, and it's such a, like, these 12 issues, just, you can read them all in an afternoon. Like, it's really, it flows really smoothly and really quickly. So, yeah, I was glad that we did that, too. Because, as we said, some of the best stuff, some of the funniest stuff, the best part of the series is what happens in the last 6 issues.
Yeah.
That was good. It works. It's a nice little, I don't have the collected edition. I think, John, you said you have
I have the Ultimate Collection, but like I looked on Amazon, like when I bought it, it was like maybe $35. Like I bought it like
new.
Now I looked online. Yeah, like I looked online, and it's like the full thing. It's like $100 or over $100.
Dang.
No, I was just like on Amazon, like all of the editions. I think like the used editions were like $50 or something crazy.
Well, that's because it's one of those small books. It didn't sell a lot, but there are people who want it, obviously.
Yeah.
But it's also one of those books that probably they put out the collected edition, but they probably did a pretty small run of the collected edition too. And so that's probably also out of print. So those are usually, those kind of become like little hidden gems. There's occasionally a few books like that where it's a mainstream comic, but they don't put out a huge run of collected editions. And then, years later, when people are going back looking for old comics, most people would rather buy a trade paperback or, a collected edition rather than have all the individual issues. So now we're at a point where even like limited run collected trade paperbacks, which are not first printings of the original series, but they're actually still worth a pretty penny because you just can't really get them much anywhere else.
Yeah, I was pretty shocked when I looked it up though. I was like, man, because I was like, I was like, this is a book I'd recommend to people, but then I'm like, yeah, you should read it in one sitting, and then I looked it up and I was like, oh my god, okay.
Yeah, never mind. I guess Marvel's digital thing, Marvel Infinity, I think that's what that is. I don't know if it's on there because obviously I don't have it, their service, but also because it doesn't have everything. It's got like a limited selection of what you can read.
Okay.
So I don't know if it would be on there, but yeah, Nextwave is definitely a book that I recommend to people. It's probably the least Warren Ellis-y book ever written by Warren Ellis.
Which was what I was gonna say, because I was like, I read Planetary like after reading Nextwave, and I'm like, man, this is different. It was
so
like
different.
It was so heavy. I was like,
yeah, exactly.
Oh
and Planetary. I love Planetary. That's like so high on my list of books we're going to talk about on this podcast. And it is, like you said, it's completely different than Nextwave. I think I mentioned Nextwave is kind of more like Authority. Warren Ellis did Stormwatch, which turned into the Authority. Nextwave is basically like the Authority, but without any of the like science fiction or big ideas. And it's just like pure action, pure just like silly names, silly visuals, and characters punching each other.
For what it's worth, Nextwave is on Marvel Unlimited.
Okay, good.
All 12
okay,
issues.
good.
Excellent.
Okay.
So, then, yeah, I would recommend if you get Marvel Unlimited.
That's probably the cheapest way to read it.
Probably.
Exactly.
Yeah, I was going to say, even like the tagline to the book, Nextwave, on the first issue, it's got their little tagline, Healing America by Beating People Up.
Yeah.
Which is such a great, there's no pretensions about what's going on in this book. It is characters punching each other, and that's all you want. And occasionally making a joke about it.
I'd say more than occasionally.
It's like, if I can write a book as like this, like another one. Like I said with I Kill Giants, I was like, if I can write a book like this, I'll be satisfied.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is great.
Yeah,
love it.
I do think, I said this earlier, but I'm just going to underline it one last time. One of the biggest selling points of this book, one of the reasons it works so well, is Stuart Immonen's beautiful, like, pop art, comic art.
Yeah.
I mean, like, the covers are so cool. They all look like concert posters. Just like cool stuff going on. The way he draws his characters, I just love his style. I don't know enough about art to tell you exactly why it's so perfect, but it's perfect. You can just trust me on that one. I think it's safe to say that we all recommend Nextwave.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a good read.
Yeah. Well then, John, thank you very much for coming back, being on the show.
Thank you for having me again.
We will definitely have you back for our other big super secret project that we're not going to talk about just yet, but
okay.
John is going to be back, and we will talk about more comics with John, and I am very happy about that.
Yes, me too.
Woo! Yeah, all right. So thank you, everybody, for listening. My name is Aaron Walther. You can find me on Facebook, and you can also find me on Twitter at AAWALTHER. Not very active on Twitter. I mostly just use it to promote the podcast, but I am there. So if you are looking to follow people, you can follow me. You can find new episodes of the podcast at comicdna.podbean.com. And I can announce that we are finally on iTunes. So if you are an iTunes user, you can search Comic DNA on iTunes, and we will hopefully show up. At least we should, last time I checked. So, also, one final plug of mine, you can find comics that I write and some that I draw at newhavencomics.com and also at aaronwalther.com. And I do have a Kickstarter currently running. It's called Urban Archer and Abracadiva, and it is a superhero romance comic set in 1970s San Francisco. So if that sounds like something you might be interested in, check us out on Kickstarter. If you go to any of the websites I just mentioned, you'll also find links there, and give it a look. And I think that about does it for me. Luke?
As always, you can find me at Facebook, Luke Moritz, and you can find me on Twitter, at Luke T. Moritz. And, follow me if you like. And that's it for me. John?
Okay, well, you can find me on Facebook at Jon Parrish, or my writer page, Jon Parrish, comic book writer. You can find me on Twitter at Jon_H_Parrish. And you can find me, read some of my comics on my website at secretsandshadows.net. And if you feel like following me on Twitter, just be prepared to put up with the random stuff I tweet about sometimes.
Excellent. I really need to get better at randomly tweeting stuff, because apparently that's how people use Twitter. But
that's how I use
Twitter.
I try to do promotional stuff, but I usually just end up just talking about like what I saw, or like random stuff, like what I ate or something. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, like I said, apparently that's what Twitter is for. I'm really bad at that. I'm a shut-in. I don't talk to people. I don't do anything like that. So, excellent. Well, everybody come back for the next episode. We have another returning guest, Mr. Anthony Mathenia, he was the guest on Miracle Man Book 2. He will be back to talk about Ghost World by Dan Clowes. Very excited to talk about that book, because I'm a big fan of Clowes, and I think we've been a little heavy on some of the superhero material on this show, so it'll be nice to get something of a little bit of a different flavor. So come back next episode. We're going to talk about Dan Clowes' Ghost World. Thank you very much, everybody, for listening. We will see you all next time.
Do you want a haircut?
The Beyond Corporation's gonna help you out.
Need a toothbrush?
The Beyond Corporation's got an extra one.
Do you have a stepson?
The Beyond Corporation's gonna rub him out.
Do you see a monster or a pirate? A electric emu, a giant sky rat, a midget Hitler, or Polish pilot? Don't call your mom or your doctor, just pick up the phone and call Nextwave. Whoa, Nextwave. Give us a Nextwave roll call. Monica! It's gonna microwave your Terry! It's gonna steal all your stuff. Error! It's going to organize your sock drawer.